That alone, verse number 83. To break, to exist, and to come into being is the nature of bodies here. One goes, another takes its place. Remaining in the highest, the self that knows all these three, the indivisible one, is free of modifications. Commentary. We are now approaching the close of our study. It is time to fix our notion of self-realization. The seeker of the self is a consciousness that animates the physical body. This body, or the consciousness dwelling within it, is confronted by three kinds of obstructions or negative values: non-existence, darkness, and death. The first Aranyaka of the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad mentions a famous prayer which refers to these three aspects: asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya. 1:3:28. This means, lead me from untruth to truth, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death to immortality. It is worth examining this in detail. If you consider the experiences of your body-mind complex, you'll readily observe that you experience heat and cold, pain and pleasure, and sensations of elation and depression. There are many such dualities, but whenever you think that any one of them is a fixed quality which will exist forever, it is already gone. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advises Arjuna to turn away from all dualities. Although they are inevitable, he points out that they come and go and have no permanent existence. And what is our true existence? What is non-existent and seemingly existent is called falsehood. It is not true. If it were true, it would be true throughout. Pain and pleasure are not true because they do not exist throughout. They are not untrue because we experience them. So their position is true and untrue. They both are and are not. If they were not at all true, we wouldn't experience them. We do experience them, so they are true. But they are not permanent, so they are untrue. They come under the category of Maya. Maya is sad-asad, true and untrue. Most of the time, we are focused on these kinds of transitory experiences, which is why we pray, Asato ma satgamaya, lead us from non-existence to existence. From birth, we carry this body around, yet we know almost nothing of its secrets. We do not know how sleep comes or where dreams come from. We do not know how we wake up. Although the body is ours, its states of consciousness are not in our hands. They are all operated for us as if by some unknown entity. When you put food in your mouth, the salivary glands salivate. Why? We don't know. There are any number of glandular functions which are autonomous and screened away from our consciousness. In fact, most of the body's functions operate out of our sight. Most of our lives are also steeped in darkness. We know nothing of what is going on in the next room. We forget the past. We don't know our future, what is destined for us. On the whole, our awareness is like a small island floating in an ocean of darkness. So for this we pray, Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Please take us from darkness to light. Our bodies appear to be a single whole, but each one is actually a colony of billions of more or less autonomous units which interact like a corporation. Some of them have an affinity to work together, while others are opposed to each other. in the myriad forms within us is the principle of love and strife, shared by so many beings. They all come into being, remain for some time, and then die. When they die, their places are taken by new bodies, which occupy the same niche for a while. Then they too pass away, leaving the stage to others. We think of the process in which cells die and are replaced by new ones as our growth. From infancy through childhood to adulthood, there is a continuous transformation taking place. Since the birth and death of cells is invisible to us, we don't much notice until the time when dead cells are no longer being replenished. Eventually, the vitality of the system begins to run short, and ultimately it collapses. The body is like a big maternity ward, nursery school, marketplace, hospital, and graveyard, all rolled into one. It is a maternity ward for the millions and billions of little beings being created within it. It is a nursery school where they are all taught how to integrate, work together, collide or fight. It is a marketplace where they carry out all their transactions, and a hospital where broken tissues are lying in bed, receiving maintenance and repair. For some time, self-correction is carried out. Then finally the priest comes, the final prayer is given, and all life forces cease. Once the whole system becomes a graveyard, it is handed over to be buried somewhere. When we think of the perishable nature of the body, we pray, Mrityor ma amritam gamaya, lead us from death to immortality. Whether it is buried or burned or whatever, nothing is lost. As it says in the Upanishads, the fire goes to the fire, the water goes to the water, and air goes to the air. Or, as Gurdjieff puts it, the acorns which do not become oaks become fertilizer. We are all part of a system for nourishment for others. When we sit for meals, what is served on the table was all living beings a few hours, days, or months before. Those living beings have now become food. When I see truckloads of pigs going down the road, I visualize how they all sit on plates on somebody's dinner table. While they are on the truck, they all look around curiously. They are very emotional, but once they are a dish on the table, you don't see their eyes, looks, or emotions. I feel very sensitive about them. I can still picture them alive. So I wonder how people can eat them. But then the eggplant and the spinach may have their own thoughts. I don't know about those. So we are a part of this continuous transformation of birth, growth, and decay. But is that all? If that is all, what is life? If our only significance is to fill a link in a biological chain, why should we bother to educate ourselves? Why should we take so much trouble to read Plato and Aristotle, or to learn those terrible things called logarithms? So that's not it. There must be something more to life. We can see there is impermanence, darkness, and death, and even continuation after death. When we look at nature, it vouchsafes two things. One is that when life begins as an entity in a body, nature provides for the continuation of that life for some time by giving it nourishment, a certain animation of consciousness, capacity for self-repair and self-correction, and the power of adapting itself to its environment until its death. This is the short-lived arrangement. Nature also has a long-term arrangement. Although the individual life eventually terminates, it can transfer its essence into a new body. This is why opposite sexes are attracted to each other. They procreate and produce progeny. through whom the species is continued. In beings where sexual procreation is not possible, nature procreates by just splitting them in two. In any case, the species is continued beyond the individual members. If you take the theory of evolution as a reality, all forms of life are parts of the biologic mainstream. We are all part of one stream of life whose history is much longer than any human life. Nothing in this theory gives us any reason to discipline ourselves or to have any kind of morality or higher values. There is no need to enlarge our intellect. So for us to commit ourselves to a higher form of life, there should be a possibility of somehow moving from non-existence to existence, darkness to light, and death to immortality. Then our life can have meaning. Of course, it is out of the question to immortalize the body. Narayana Guru agrees here with the evolutionists that the very nature of the body is to break, then for something new to come, and for that to continue for a while before it also breaks. Then its place is taken by another, and this will continue on and on. So there is nothing called the immortality of the body. When Sri Aurobindo expounded his theory of spiritual evolution and the descent of the supramental, I don't know if he meant it this way, but what his devotees understood, and we are likely to think when we read his book, is that the body, which is a receptacle of the spirit, is slowly changed by the supramental spirit to become an immortal vessel to hold life. He clearly seemed to imply a physical immortality rather than any theoretical one. During his lifetime, no one in the ashram was allowed to ask the question of what would happen after Aurobindo's death. It was taboo. They all believed he would not die and that his body was immortal. When he died, the ashram people wouldn't believe it. They refused to bury him. There was a French government at that time, and they did not subscribe to that belief. They had a law that a dead person should be buried within 3 days. The ashram people said, no, he is alive, he is in samadhi. After the 3rd day, the government decided to bury him forcefully. So the ashram finally allowed it after much dispute that he was still physically immortal. Then they changed their theory. They said he is continuing now in the mother. He has transferred himself to her. He is immortalizing the mother so she will not die. She did live to be 97, but when she died, nobody made any dispute. She was immediately buried. It is not a feasible theory that the body can become immortal. So then, where do you become immortal? In the mind? How could that be? After all, what is the mind? We can't say it is an entity by itself, because it is dependent on a biochemical system for its existence. Without the body, we cannot think or know anything. You don't even have power over the different phases of consciousness. The alternating phases of consciousness come on their own. No matter how hard you fight, in a little while you will be snoring. So you can't immortalize the mind, because you can't immortalize the body it depends on. What then is this thing called immortality? We should turn again and again to the very first verse, where Narayana Guru referred to a substance, a karu, which has 3 modes. In one aspect, it becomes the awareness, the knowledge that fills the essential properties of everything and identifies them as the knowledge of a thing. The same karu is all this concrete manifestation as well as the individual subjective consciousness. When what is objectively out there, what is subjectively experienced, and the consciousness of things both outside and inside are all reduced or traced to one common substance, it is unbroken. There is no cleft in it anywhere. We can't say whether it is a thing or a not thing. It is both thing and not thing. Basically, we can say the Karu is a law that governs everything. The law is changeless, but at the same time, it governs all changes. There is one entity in us which bears striking resemblance to this, that which detects and recognizes the law within us, the buddhi. When a physicist or a mathematician make calculations about the cosmos, the reasoning going on within the private shell of their skull somehow tallies with the astrophysical reality. The exact position of a star or a planet and the trajectory of a rocket to reach it can be computed in the mind of a person when they are not even looking at the sky. Mathematics gives mind access to the principle of harmony or discord in the external world. Whether in a musical symphony, the dance of heavenly bodies, or the interactions of microscopic particles. Although our understanding of this principle grows and changes over time, the principle itself does not. This is called the principle of homogeneity, samana adhikarana. It is this samana adhikarana, this homogeneity, that the contents of consciousness and the contents of the material world become one total system. Change takes place within the system, but the system as such doesn't change. As we are already that, there is no reason for us to become immortal. We are part of an immortal system. When you know this from a peak state of consciousness, you are only amused by the changes, not threatened by them, even though part of the amusement is regarding your own dissolution. You can just look at it and smile. Then you are ready to experience the sweet calmness with which a Socrates or a Buddha passes away, with no struggle, just witnessing the event. As the Buddha described it, it is like a dewdrop falling into a lake and merging with it. As if from above you are viewing the phenomenality of things. Thus knowing is realization, not any becoming. You don't have to become anything. Our body is an object lesson. When we see how it changes and perishes day by day, it prepares us for its final dissolution. Dying with grace is as beautiful as living with grace. To live in grace and die in grace, one should have a vision of this great symphony of life, in which mortality brings so much variegation on an immortal stage. Nataraja Guru, in his commentary on this verse, wants us to specially notice the ontological richness of life. Although this body is a decaying and perishing one, and this mind is an ephemeral experience, within it is also placed this grand scheme of universal truth, shining in all its resplendence. You have a mortal body to introduce you to the immortal theme, a stupid mind to lead you to the highest of all wisdom, and deep darkness to become the backdrop for the brightest of all lights. For all this you need a body, a life, a mind. When you see this, it is not a paradox that frightens you, but a paradox that surprises you and brings you so much beauty. And the free translation of verse 83 is as follows. The changeless self from its vertical height witnesses the flux of becoming, noticing how bodies exist and perish and come into being again, and how one is substituted by another.